Good morning to all of you. I welcome all the distinguished guests on the dais, the chief guest, Mr. Chaitanya Prasad, the Controller General, Patent, Trademark, Design and GI, Indian Patent Office, Government of India, Mr. Fernando dos Santos, Director General, African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, Mr. Mahendra Agarwal, our special guest of honor, who is the CEO of Gati Limited, my very old, inspiring and guidepost, Professor Hans Godard, Professor Sigram Sangler, John, our knowledge partner from Sugru Mayon, Mike Dwanzwick, our co-organizer from Lakshmi Kumaran, Dr. Malati, who is just like my sister, and distinguished speakers from more than 30 countries, and dear delegate friends. It is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you at this 7th edition of Global Intellectual Property Convention. It is with the grace of God and with the support and cooperation of all of you that we have been able to consistently organize this annual mega IP event in India, and it has been taking a true global character over the years. And the theme of this 7th IP convention is the power of IP, the gateway to growth. When I say this, I also believe in it, because today IP has become the powerhouse to the engine of growth. The entire global knowledge-driven economy today is being driven practically by the innovation and the technology, and the intellectual property right actually make this intellectual property a valuable commercial asset for the corporates. From several studies, it is found that the commercial value of the IP asset has been increasing consistently for the past few years, and it is also contributing a lot in the national income of the country, and there is a direct correlation between the recognition of the intellectual property as a whole and the growth in the economy, the size of the economy. When we look at the United States, today we find that 35% of the US GDP is contributed by the IP intensive industries. And similarly, when we look at European Union, we find 39% of the gross domestic product of all the European nations put together who are part of the European Union, that is 39%. Not only the income, because we understand in the economic field that if there is a growth, if there is wealth, but if it is not adding to the employment of the people, it is a jobless growth. But what we find from the studies that the IP is also contributing to the growth in employment. And what we find from the studies that almost 11% of the employment is generated in the United States only through the copyright. In all the G8 countries, there is a quite good contribution not only in the GDP but also in the employment generation through the IP. So therefore, if we say that IP has really become a powerhouse for the economic growth, in true sense, by contributing to the share of the GDP and also contributing to the generation of the employment, I think I would not be exaggerating in my this understanding. Now, when we think about IP, we have to understand IP in a holistic manner. And there I find there are 5 important components of IP, which makes the true analysis of the strength of IP in a country as a IP ecosystem. And these 5 components are creation of IP. First and foremost requirement is the creation of IP. If we believe in creation, then we also believe that copying of IP is bad. So we must believe that we must create an environment whereby there is creation of IP through good infrastructure for research and development and for creativity. So this is first creation. Then once we create IP, so it is important to give due protection to IP. Without protection, as we need protection for our tangible wealth, we also need protection for our intangible wealth. So the second important aspect is the protection. And this protection is given through a proper, harmonious, unified way of legal framework. And for this legal framework today, under the WTO regime, we have the TRIPS agreement, and all the member countries have to follow the TRIPS requirement and to have a good legal framework for all different aspects of the IP. And those 7 important aspects of the IP in relation to the patent, copyright, trademark, industrial design, geographical indications, trade secrets, and the integrated circuits and layout designs. Besides this also, there are certain issues on the traditional knowledge and various other things. But this protection is created through a proper legal framework under the TRIPS and several other conventions of WIPO and various other conventions, say for example, conventions on biodiversity under the UN Convention. The third important issue is on the enforcement of the IP. If you have a legal framework for protection of IP, but if you don't have a good enforcement atmosphere, then the legal framework alone will not help. So therefore, you need a good enforcement environment. And this enforcement is again depending upon 3 factors. And these 3 factors are, who are the enforcing agencies? The enforcement is done when we have an international trade today in the age of globalization. Then the first enforcing agencies is at the border. And at the border, we have the customs. So the custom authorities have to be trained properly so that they understand what is IP law and what is IP and how to see that the cross-border transactions do not vitiate the IP laws and the anti-counterfeiting measures are taken duly. So first is customs, then locally we have the police, because several IP laws provide not only for the civil remedies but also for the criminal remedies, and especially for the copyright and the trademark. So whenever there are criminal offenses as provided in the legal framework, we have to look for that the police stations, they are trained properly to have a proper enforcement. Because sometimes when you go to the police station and lodge a FIR, sometimes the police officer would say, what for you have come? He would say that somebody is violating your copyright or trademark. Then how it is violated? So somebody say that he is using my brand name. So he is using your brand name, that he is helping you to build your brand. So this is the kind of perception many police officers has. So we have to train those the enforcing agencies. And the third important aspect of the enforcement is the judiciary. So for judiciary, India, I think Mr. Chaitanya Prasad would agree with me that in Supreme Court we have a special IP bench, and in the new national IPR policy, the draft policy is on the website of India government, wherein in the draft IPR policy, the government has thought of creating more and more IP benches, even at the district levels of the courts. So the third important aspect is the judiciary. So these are the important areas for the enforcement. So creation, protection, enforcement. And the fourth important area in the IP ecosystem is the commercialization of the IP. Because unless you bring the technology to the users, it may be just an invention. And unfortunately, a lot of inventions are just lying dormant in the research organizations. So there has to be a proper interface between the research institutions and the industry or the investors. So both the investors and the innovators should have a close nexus with the research organizations. So with this commercialization, proper technology transfer has to take place, proper licensing system has to be introduced, and with this we also make the IP ecosystem stronger. So commercialization is also a very important area. And then finally, and I say this is the bottom of the pyramid of the entire ecosystem, IP ecosystem, and this is where I personally feel, and this is where the aim and objective of this GIPC convention is, that the awareness of IP, this is most important, I think. And in the developing countries particularly, where people are yet to understand the IP in its totality. Because today, but I have seen that IP is not something which has a concern only in the developed country. It has an equal concern in the developing countries. And people are looking India as a beacon to take a lead in providing a complete holistic picture about the IP ecosystem. And I am very proud to say that the present new government, under the dynamic leadership of our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, and our Commerce Minister, who is heading this IP department, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, immediately after taking charge on 26th May 2014, they have come out with an idea of developing a full-fledged national IPR policy for our country. And most likely this national IPR policy will be announced by 31st March 2015. And with that, I think India would be able to give a message to the whole world that we give due importance to technology, innovation, and the IP ecosystem. But one thing which, before I conclude, I would like to say that today there has to be a trade-off between economic growth and the public interest. Sometimes we feel that IP should be used only as a tool, as a commercial value. But we have to understand that the entire economic development is desired to have a human face. So whenever, in case of pharma, there is an issue of public health, we have to give a balanced approach to the issue of the IPR. In case of India, it is fully TRIPS compliant country. It has been upheld by several court judgments and even at the several cases before the dispute settlement of body of the WTO. But despite that, unfortunately, we have some examples where some countries are not fully satisfied about certain provisions of the patent acts in India, though many people feel that those provisions are in the public interest. So there I feel that a consensus view have to be taken to draw a balanced picture about the commercial aspect of the IPR and the human aspect of the IPR. So with these few remarks, and then after giving my due thanks to all the participants to make this GIPC a very successful event in the 7th consecutive year, and the next IPR convention we will be doing in 2016 in Delhi, and in this particular 7th convention we will have 3 days to learn, and I hope those who are participating, they will be feeling more enlightened and more learned after attending almost 20 technical sessions and 4 plenary sessions. And I understand that everybody would be benefited out of this. With these few remarks, I once again thank you all very much. Thank you.